This video is about different ways of processing your chilies after you've picked them. It follows on from my recent video about harvesting and basic preservation, where I covered freezing, drying and fermenting. Now, I've fermented thousands of batches, tested every drying technique and discovered that most advice completely misses the point. Each preservation method creates an entirely different ingredient, and using the wrong one is like reaching for salt when you need sugar. Today we will discuss exactly how I process my harvests, not generic advice, the actual techniques I use after growing hundreds of varieties and making hot sauce commercially. You'll get my exact salt calculations and visual cues that tell you what's happening, and the shortcuts that took me years to figure out. Let's start with why this matters more than you think. Here's what clicked for me after ruining countless batches. You're not preserving chilies, you're creating three distinct ingredients that behave completely different in your kitchen. Freezing locks in that bright, fresh heat that destroys cell structure. Your chilies will never be crisp again, but they'll melt beautifully into curries and stews. 1 year max before flavor degrades pretty noticeably. Drying concentrates everything, capsaicin, sugars, aromatics, into an intense package that lasts years. But you lose volatile compounds that give fresh chilies their complexity. Perfect for rubs and powders where you want pure concentrated flavor. Fermenting? Well, that's alchemy, and it's my favorite way of preserving chilies. It's just so much fun. Basically, lactobacillus bacteria transforms simple sugars into complex acids and umami compounds that don't exist in fresh chilies. Done right, they improve for years, developing layers most commercial sources cannot touch. Something that seems to confuse a lot of folks when it comes to fermenting. What do you weigh to calculate salt percentage? Now, with a brine fermentation, you are measuring the water weight only. So you're adding 2.5 to 3% salt by water weight only. With a mash fermentation, you're going to be measuring the total ingredients. So all the mash, you're going to weigh that up and you're going to work out 2.5 to 3% salt based on that measurement. Don't mix these up, or else you're going to grow pathogens and possibly create inedible salt bombs. Once you understand that you're building an arsenal of different ingredients, not just preserving excess, everything changes. 20 years ago, I thought preservation was about avoiding waste. Now I know it's about controlled transformation. Here's what's really happening. With freezing, it ruptures cell walls through ice crystal formation, and those crisp cayennes become soft, but their capsicanoids and flavor compounds remain intact. Drying removes moisture, concentrating everything. But here's what matters. Capsaicin is stable, but volatile aromatics escape above around 45 degrees Celsius. That's why sun-dried chilies taste different from dehydrator ones. Low and slow preserves complexity, hot and fast gives you pure heat and obviously gets the job done a lot quicker. I keep my dehydrator under 45 degrees Celsius unless I'm specifically after that kind of roasted flavor. Now, fermenting, on the other hand, transforms and creates new flavors. Lactobacillus bacteria converts sugar to lactic acid, which typically drops the pH well below 4.0 and creates an environment where pathogens can't survive. But they also produce glutamates, the same compounds that make aged cheese and cured meats so savory. A properly fermented ghost pepper develops umami notes that make fresh ones seem one-dimensional. There are some things you need to watch out for, obviously, if you're doing a fermentation, and I've got plenty of videos on this on my channel. In fact, I will link some down below. But the most common one is that white film that you sometimes get on ferments. This is usually Kahm yeast. It's harmless but annoying, although excessive amounts of it can give a bit of a yeasty flavor, so it's not great. You can scrape it off and carry on, but if there is any fuzzy growth or putrid smells, that means bin it immediately. Now, after hundreds of fermentations, I trust my nose nearly as much as my pH meter. I just noticed down at my feet, I have some gorgeous, gorgeous chilies. Look at that. Beautiful CC jalapeno. Please do that. I think I'm going to take that inside. We've got a meal that I'm going to use that in. So fresh chilies are obviously always best, but obviously if you're preserving them and you want to use them throughout the year after all of these beauties have died, then that's what we're talking about today. Storage changes everything too. Frozen chilies, 1 year Generally, that's my maximum. For dried chilies, 2 to 4 years in an airtight container. I've seen them actually going for a lot longer than that, but you'll start losing some flavor after that point. With fermented, I hesitate to say this, but it's nearly indefinite. If you've fermented correctly, if you fermented safely, then your fermentation can last so many years and it will maintain its flavor and health benefits as well. I've got 5-year-old fermentations that just keep getting better. In fact, I'll link a couple videos down below with some of my very long-term fermentations. Now for the techniques that separate hobby growers and hobby sauce makers with the professionals. Freezing. Moisture is your enemy. Wash your chilies, then dry them completely. I mean completely. Any surface water creates freezer burn, and yeah, that's not going to do well for your chilies. 3 approaches that work when it comes to freezing. Number 1, hold chilies in bags. This can be a bit wasteful, but it's a simple process. Mashed chilies inside vacuum seal bags, that's taking it a whole step further. It's still a little bit wasteful in terms of the bags themselves, but it takes up way less space and you'll get plenty more chilies inside this. So it's very space efficient and is very easy to measure and actually use throughout the year. Another method I love is ice cube portions of mashed up chilies. That ice cube trick, that was a brilliant tip from one of my Patreons. This is exactly why I love our Patreon community. You lot constantly share techniques that make everyone better. If you want to join these conversations and directly influence what I test next and the sort of videos I make, check out the link below. We're always discussing preservation experiments and gardening tips and processes. It's just a lot of fun, but I personally help with as much as I can, and I make myself as available as I can on the various platforms that I have through Patreon and also YouTube memberships. A quick warning on those ice cubes though. Label super hot cubes clearly. You don't want to throw in a super hot cube when you expected a cube of mashed cayenne. Believe me, I've done that and it's not great. Now, when it comes to drying, climate dictates method. UK humidity killed my air drying attempts until I accepted reality and bought a dehydrator. Slice thick-walled varieties like jalapenos, they'll rot before drying whole. Thin varieties like Thai chilies or CC peri peri, they dry whole beautifully. If you want to preserve the seeds, then you want to keep those temperatures quite a bit lower, as I mentioned in my previous video. If you just want flavor, you can crank it up, but still not too high because you can still ruin the flavor. But I like to stick to around about 40-45 degrees Celsius. My favorite trick is puree chilies with a touch of salt. Spread it thin like fruit leather. It dries fast, stores compact, and it rehydrates instantly. And yeah, you can also make some interesting snacks. In fact, I'll have to do a video on that in the future and show you how I do it, making fruit roll-ups with chilies. Delicious. Now, fermenting. This is where precision matters. The brine method. Weigh your water. Multiply by 0.025 or 0.03, or if you want to make it really simple, I have a link down below. I created a little calculator on my website. It'll help you get to this. But 0.025 or 0.03 for salt weight. So 1,000 grams of water, 1 liter of water is 25 to 30 grams salt. Very simple. Mash method, exactly the same, except you're not weighing the water, you're weighing the blended chilies and whatever other ingredients you have in there. Make sure to measure that all and then add the salt according to that. Now, I prefer mashers for large batches. It uses less space, ferments faster, and develops deeper flavors. But brine fermentations, I still do them now and then, it really depends. But for larger batches, I much prefer doing a mash fermentation. You want to keep everything submerged if you're doing a brine fermentation. Fermentation weights work, but here's my little secret. Cabbage leaves. So I have got a video, I showed this. It's a fantastic way. You don't have to go and buy any fancy fermentation weights. Take a piece of cabbage, especially if you have jars that have a bit of a shoulder on them. Push that cabbage down underneath that shoulder and it will pretty much hold all the chilies in there. Now, why do I choose cabbage leaves? Well, they're loaded with lactobacillus. It adds complexity and works as, well, obviously a natural weight. Plus, they're free. So, yeah, fantastic way to do it. Just ensure that there's a good CO2 buildup on top. In fact, I don't actually use weights. This is my little secret. I don't really use weights anymore. I make sure that the air gap above the chilies that I'm fermenting, whether it is a mash fermentation or a brine fermentation. I make sure the air gap is minimal. So about an inch for a 1 liter jar. And as long as you're using very fresh chilies, you've sterilized and sanitized the jars and everything that you're using for your fermentation, then it's going to build up enough CO2 that it's going to create a nice little layer that's going to protect your chili mash. If you don't, then yeah, you're going to get a lot of Kahm yeast and potentially even worse than that. A beginner mistake, over checking. Every time you open that jar, you're inviting problems. Leave it alone for at least a week, preferably longer, but at least 1 week. And that little bit of bubbling, that's success, nothing to be worried about. Now, on that note, it's not always going to bubble. It's not always going to produce a ton of CO2, so you've got to watch out for that. The main reason that happens is you're using chilies that aren't fully ripe, so there's not a lot of sugars in there for the lactobacillus to eat. Or you've gone and used store-bought chilies that have been sprayed. Now, a lot of the spraying that happens is to actually kill off things like lactobacillus to keep those chilies fresh for purchase and make them last longer on the shelf, but that's going to ruin your fermentation. So make sure you use very ripe chilies and make sure you keep everything nice and clean and sterilized. Again, I have videos that I'll link down below to help you with that. Which method gives you maximum versatility? After processing literally tons of chilies commercially, let me share what actually works for home use, because my operation looks nothing like what you need. I ferment 90% of my harvest for hot sauce production, but that's my business. For your kitchen, here's the system that gives maximum flexibility. Freeze enough for your weekly cooking. Those Tuesday night curries, Sunday night stir fries. I keep a bag of whole frozen jalapenos and portion cubes of super hot mash always ready. They're your insurance policy against boring meals. Dry 1 or 2 varieties that you use constantly. My kitchen always has homemade cayenne powder and dried Thai chilies and dry peri-peris. Grind them separately, because if you mix them, then it's just going to taste like a generic spice rather than the specific heat and the specific flavors that those various chilies produce. Store-bought cayenne has nothing on the powder from chilies that you dry yourself. Just, they taste amazing. Ferment small experimental batches. The way I do my hot sauce experimentation, I have loads of little batches of fermentations going on all the time. If I'm working on a very specific sauce, then I will ferment like a 5 liter batch of, let's say, cayenne, and I'll use bits of that within experimental recipes that I'm trying out. But start with single varieties. Same reason as I mentioned before with dried. With single varieties, you know what you're getting. You're learning what the fermented habanero tastes like, what the fermented Fresno tastes like, what the fermented cayenne tastes like, and how you combine that with other ingredients, what it is all going to come together as. It's just so much easier to work with than mixing a whole bunch together. You never know what you're going to get. My best-selling sauce started as a simple fermented cayenne mash with a 2.5% salt. That's my Blazing Buffalo Extreme. It's wonderful. Go and check it out if you do want to try a bottle of it. It's down in the description below, or go to chillichump.com and you'll be able to see all the other sauces that I have. But that base has become the foundation for quite a few other sauces as well, so a little bit of a secret there. But for home use, it's fantastic to make a quick sauce that you want to add to a burger or throw onto some chicken wings. It's just amazing. Here's what changed my sauce making. Think of fermented mashes as ingredients, not finished products. Sometimes they can be finished products, but most of the time, yeah, think of them as ingredients. That fermented peri-peri mash, it's your umami base. Add vinegar for tang, fresh fruit for sweetness, herbs for complexity. The fermentation provides the depth that you just can't fake with fresh ingredients. The beauty is you don't need my commercial setup. A few jars fermenting, some bags in the freezer, and quality dried powders gives you more options than any shop-bought collection. You're creating ingredients that don't exist in nature. Concentrated flavor bombs, umami-rich bases, ready-to-use heat that transforms ordinary cooking into something special. Here's your challenge. Pick one abundant variety this week, just one. Freeze a bag for your next curry or stew, dry a batch, and watch how the color deepens, smell how the aroma changes. and start a small fermentation jar with exactly 2.5% salt. In 3 weeks, taste all three side by side, and that's when it should click. You'll understand why I ferment commercially, why certain dishes need frozen chilies, and why homemade powder changes, well, so many things. Share your results down below. Which variety did you choose? What surprised you? I read every comment and personally answer as many questions as I can and help troubleshoot issues that you may have. In upcoming videos, I'll show you exactly what to do with these preserved chilies. Hit subscribe down below so you don't miss them. And remember, every sauce maker, every master sauce maker started with one jar bubbling on their counter. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, stay spicy.